Thank you, Professor Amelon. Thank you, Professor Liz Bachmann. And I thank Mr. Lang, Ms. Jessica Hein, our student helpers, Mr. Nifo, and Ms. Laura for organizing this event. Now, I see that there are many people standing around, but there are still some seats in the rows in the front of the room. So feel free to come around, look for your seats while I'm talking, right? Don't be shy. 自己找座位，不用站在后面，所有的后面都可以坐。Yeah, and thank you for so many enthusiastic audience to come to Literary Frankfurt public transportation today after such a historic event, right? Yay, thank you. So my name is Zhiyi, Professor of Technology at Goethe University. And dear colleagues, students, friends, and guests, welcome to this dialogue with Geling and Yang Lian, two of the most important Chinese authors today. An introduction of them is hardly necessary, at least for the predominant majority here, so let me keep it short. Yang Lian grew up in a literary family, but was trained as a ballet dancer when she was a teenager, and she danced in the People's Liberation Army Art Corps. She began her writing career as a war correspondent in the Sino-Vietnam War, 1979. This traumatic experience of witnessing so much human suffering turned her resolutely against war and violence, a theme we find in all her works. A highly disciplined and productive writer, she published her first novel in 1986 and has since produced a steady stream of novels, novellas, short stories, essays, and screenplays. Her novels, The Flowers of War, 金陵十三钗, The Criminal 陆焉识, 陆淡焉识, and Youth, 芳华, among others, have been adapted into feature films. As a scriptwriter, she has won numerous prizes too, for films like 小鱼, 天域, and 梅兰芳, and is a jury member for the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. Yang Lian was born in Bern, Switzerland, to two Chinese diplomats, and began writing when he was sent to the countryside during the Cultural Revolution. In the 1980s, he became well known inside and outside China as a member of the now canonized Misty School of Poetry, 朦胧诗. He was invited to visit Australia and New Zealand in 1988, and for well-known reasons became a literary exile the next year. So ever since then, he has become a highly individual voice in world literature, culture, and politics. His poems have been translated into more than 20 languages. He has won numerous international poetry prizes and decorations, and has been a board member of PPM 10 International since 2007. As our first IZO fellow, Yang Lian will also give a poetry writing workshop tomorrow for our students, as well as next Friday. So if you are a member of Goethe University and would like to learn from the maestro, you are welcome to talk to me for registration after the event. It is our special honor today to exhibit 4 paintings from Yo-Yo, Yang Lian's wife, novelist, and artist. As you can see those beautiful, beautiful paintings here, I really love them. So Yo-Yo was a novelist and taught in Auckland University, Sydney University, SOAS, and Eton College before she followed Yang Lian to Berlin and began painting. So her paintings have been since exhibited in Italy, France, and Germany to great critical acclaim. You're welcome to examine the paintings after the event, provided you be very careful. And to complete the family affair, Yang Geling's husband, Lawrence Walker. A former U.S. diplomat who speaks 12 languages. Will later read for us the English translation of her newest work. A word about the structure of the event. I will start this dialogue by asking a few personal questions about their experience of exile. Then the two authors will each read from a recent work in Chinese, followed by English translation. Then we will hold a more in-depth discussion about literature and ethics before I open the floor for questions. So you will have half an hour for asking your questions in the end, don't worry. And now without further ado, let me begin by a very difficult question. The both of you have traveled around the world for decades, right? But both of you have decided to live in Berlin. Actually, Yang Lian has been living in Berlin for the last 10 years and Geling for 12 years. So what attracts you to Berlin, especially as it is a city of wombs, right? The wombs of history.
Go first.
Lady first.
Yeah, the first it was. Yeah, it was because my husband was.
Turn on.
I think I'm loud enough, right?
Yes. You have to wait. It should work. You have to wait 1 minute. You can start. Once.
Yeah. Okay, so I raised my voice. No need to?
No, it's okay.
Okay. People tell me different things. I don't know what to do. Yes, my husband was stationed with U.S. Embassy in Berlin, so that's how I came to Berlin. And after I settled in, I found this city is the best place for novelists. Because it's the place that makes you think, it makes you confess with your novels. So I produced my most important work, 陆犯焉识, Criminal 陆焉识, in Berlin. Then afterwards, my husband went to. I asked him to work in Germany so he can travel back and forth between Berlin and Stuttgart. So that's how we prolonged our stay in Berlin. Then I bought a house and I made further plans. And now during the pandemic, I started to learn German. And how good is your German? Very, very elementary.
Her teacher's here.
Well, again, our story may be a little bit more complex. Actually, you and I arrived Berlin for the very first time at the 2nd of January 1991 as a DAAD fellow. And you may remember that it's only 1 year and a little bit more after the falling of Berlin Wall. And just 1 year, again a little bit more after Tiananmen massacre. So that was for us a hugely stormy, shaking time. That year in 1991 was the first year that we can sit down and rethink and thought, my God, what's happened in our crazy life? And again, like Geling, that year like the explosion of volcano of writings, because since the Tiananmen, and there was no chance to sit down and even thinking. So that year, almost the whole collection of poems and more than half of collection of prose been produced. And so that was the beginning. But even more important, I realized that compared with London, where we lived later more than 15 years, the layers of history, almost like an archaeology site of Berlin, and it's represent the whole history in Europe, somehow in the world too, since the 19th century. And especially Berlin, it directly has this layer of Eastern Germany former DDR and the former communist background, and so that is not only Europe or not only West, it's actually directly linked with our own experience. So that was the reason why we kept the memory and kept the link with Berlin events, publications, and until we finished up the college. And then we came to Berlin. Like Berlin, we somehow took the good chance, bought our apartment in Berlin, and won the prize. Was extremely good compared with London. So that was the now we are here. We are here also to meet wonderful friends like Geling, Larry, and you, and you know. So that's mine.
Okay. Yeah, I also love Berlin. Actually, I met Yang Lian in Berlin when I was Pico fellow there. I was also very productive in that year, so I guess there's something special in Berlin. No offense to Frankfurt. Okay. I have a question for Geling. Many of your works portray like historical trauma, right? Really terrible things in history, like the Second Sino-Japanese War, Cultural Revolution, etc. And they have been adapted into film by important directors like Ang Lee, Zhang Yimou, Chen Kaige, Feng Xiaodang. So my first question is, how do you choose this particular human angles to describe or to portray these historical events, this trauma? How do you find your figures?
How do I find my figures? What do you mean by figures?
Your characters.
Characters, okay. Well, I'm a listener. I don't talk much in everyday life. I listen to people talk. And I got many stories actually by listening to their stories. As a Chinese, as I grew up in China, and it seems like traumas happen every day. It's just our norm, you know. When Cultural Revolution happened, I was 7 years old, and the schools all closed, and so my father was condemned very soon, and then our pastime was go watching people who just jumped the floor, and somebody just hang themselves. Then we ran through the city wild, and watching the bodies being transported from the sites. So that was just like such a traumatic experience for us. It's just like nothing, you know. So many characters actually was based on someone real, someone that's close to me. For example, my novel Criminal 入冤时, 论犯焉识, was based on my grandfather and my step-grandfather. I combined these two old men together and made this novel. Of course, every of my novels is highly fictionalized. I only have very little facts, then I fictionalize it, and I put my thoughts during the process of fictionalizing them. So that's how I get my characters.
Thank you. That's a beautiful answer. I mean, Lupanyenshi is also my favorite novel from the core. And I like it that it has many complicated characters, right? That nobody is entirely noble and nobody is entirely abject in a certain sense. So Yang Lian, what was your experience in the Cultural Revolution? You were being re-educated.
Well, when I read Geling's novel 陆犯焉识, I must say that's perhaps for me the best novel as a literature to describe that kind of a profound experience of human life. in this extremely difficult situation, which is as the tragedy of a history and the culture. And I find that is the aim is so real, which is touching the experience. For example, like when I've been sent to countries, I have like 3 years work so hard as a labor, and but compared with this kind of prisoners, and then we are also smaller version. But again, experience this same feeling. We want to escape from even the village, even only 20 kilometers from so-called home. But we are not allowed. Since the first day we arrived there, we told every 2 months we have one chance, maybe 2 days or 3 days back to so-called home. Not allowed and something. So then it's the kind of a feeling, we've been so thirsty and waiting for that kind of feeling being expressed in the literature. And then I read Goethe's novel. I thought that was wonderful. But again, all my poems, it was based on this kind of inner truth, the real experience, not only happening, Cultural Revolution, Tiananmen Massacre, Exile, or something. All those together come back to one word, the situation of man. And so in this case, I don't separate them as with a time, linear time difference. No, they are concentric circles, calm, profound, touching the depth inside of our heart. So the poetry is endlessly discovered that dark hole.
I agree. For those audience who are not familiar with Yang Lian's recent works, because I guess most audience are familiar with your poems in the 80s, I would have to say that it has become much more mature. I really love your voice. I think call it authentic is not accurate because authenticity is quite often overrated. I would say it's solid. It's really touching the fundamentals of your feelings. So since we're talking about traumas, how about June 4th, 1989? What were you doing on that day?
I was in Beijing, and at the time I was a graduate student. Actually, just in a class with a bunch of young writers like Mo Yan and myself, and all these writers now in the first line of Chinese literature. And we are in the same class, and during the time students were protesting. So we are our time going back to the school and going to the Tiananmen Square is our normal commute. Yes. So we know everything, from the beginning to the end. So that night, I heard, I stayed with my former father-in-law, mother-in-law, parents-in-law, and I heard the gunshots. I couldn't believe it, and I thought there must be some rubber gun, bullets. So I went to the street in nightgown and slippers, and I saw people were shipped, bloody bodies shipped out. Out the alleys leading to Tiananmen Square. So that time I was so shocked. I went home because I realized I'm in sleeping wear. And I cried for days. I thought, we were on a heat, in the peak of hope. It seems like we were so close to democracy. Then all of a sudden, we were dropped into the bottom of hopelessness. Then I decided to go abroad to study. Then I got admitted to this university. No. It is Chicago, Columbia College. It's a liberal arts school. Yeah. I got scholarship, full scholarships, and that's how I went to the U.S.
Well, my experience, or maybe not experience, my thought was a little bit different. After Tiananmen massacre happened, in the end of that year, I wrote a poem simply titled 1989. And this poem ended up with a line in English translation is, this is no doubt a perfectly ordinary year. And when I wrote in Chinese, 就无非是普普通通的一年. And all my friends who were in outside in exile and was shocked. And said, how could you think this year is an ordinary year? And when the literature magazine Exile and published this poem, and they actually changed the line and making opposite. This is not an ordinary year. I said, sorry, you are wrong. And they said, why? I said, well, if you are so surprised and shocked as you saw the massacre for the first time, where are the memories of all the deaths happened before? And if you forgot that, and immediately, and how could you guarantee your tear this time? It's not washing your memory again and prepare for the next shock. And to me, 1989 is not surprise at all. And because that is let's say, a station, the result of at least 10 years of the process, in the whole 80s, since the Cultural Revolution, which did the introspection of reality, history, culture, tradition, language, psychology, every person, and deeper and deeper to try to find out what's the real reason of the disaster. How could a so-called ancient civilization or cultural tradition lost our sense and understanding totally? And so this is storage the whole layers of energy and finally come back to question the society, the political situation. And then that's the reason why this explosion happened. And I have to say that even in 1988, a group of young Chinese poets, Chinese of course, poets in Beijing already we formed up a poet club and also published a magazine with the title Survivors. That was in 1988, less than 1 year before Tiananmen massacre. So somehow the poets and the subconsciously feeling this survivors is the important point of our life and our literature. And also when the Tiananmen massacre happened, I feel like, wow, the reality running up to catch the language. And after the Tiananmen massacre, I have to say, all our writings, whatever you are in China, outside of China, our writing is the survivors' literature.
Wonderful. And for those who use Chinese WeChat, you can search for 幸存者诗刊, the Survivors Poetry Journal, and you can follow your newest works. But that really brings us, I really like the topic of the amnesia of history, 历史的遗忘, because we are very good at surviving, which means we will forget part of the past, right? In order to keep on living. It is very difficult to keep on living with all these dead bodies or the blood or the trauma in mind. So I think literary works like yours, on one hand, helps us to remember what has passed so that we shall not forget. On the other hand, and that brings us to our topic today, Adorno. As Theodore Adorno argues, or in his famous dictum, to write poetry after Auschwitz is barbaric. And that, of course, is a very famous dictum with many different interpretations. So one of the interpretations which I do like is that barbarism for him means the distance between the signifier and the signified, between language and reality of the thing. So that when you use language to portray what has really happened, that is no longer what truly happened. And also as literary works, your works has to be read by readers, right? It has to be aesthetically pleasing. So how do you reconcile that? How do you reconcile the task to remember and the task as a writer to write something readers like to read, to consume?
For myself, I don't have any readers in mind. I only write what I need to express, at least, so I don't have the sense of pleasing anybody, if they like to read it or not like to read it. For me, it's just that many books like my novel, The Ninth Widow and Blue Financial, I almost knew that it's not going to be published. So when I sent to 人民文学, People's Literature magazine, although the editor-in-chief asked me to give him this work, and he returned, he rejected it. I think, if I write for anybody in mind, any reader in mind, I wouldn't be able to. If I have this standard, this self-censorship in mind, I'll be paralyzed mindly. I only write when my father was alive for him. Because my father was such a very strict mentor. He would talk to me and said these things are failures. Maybe I want to get him to like my works. That's all. Now, after he died, I'm even more asking myself, is this you honestly want to put on paper? Yes, I said. When I was young, I wanted to the words, sentences are just so unusual, so beautiful. Now, I think the most difficult is to get it right. Get it right is with all the furthermost honesty. This is what I'm experienced in my latter life as a writer. Beautiful.
Well, unfortunately, my father he was the great lover of classical Chinese poetry, of Western classical music, Western music, sometimes modern Western literature, but not modern Chinese poetry. He says modern Chinese poetry is really rubbish. Or even he's very proud for his son to write poetry, but he always says, I cannot understand your poetry.
That's the kind of Wolfgang Kubin, I guess.
Oh, Wolfgang Kubin is another case. But on the other side, again, I think the very kind of a direction of our writing is really the question and the challenge to ourselves. If I cannot set up a kind of a question mark for my next poem or next, let's say, collection or even non-poem, if I cannot feel this question, whatever is about the certain understanding of poetry or form or language, whatever, if no question, I cannot go on. But if I feel the question, I already feel, there's a direction. And then I can try to be an explorer, whatever, flying or dive into the water, I can try. Yeah. But no question, no direction. And so luckily sometimes the question, I think the good questions, I make good people. Yeah.
Thank you. Writing, honest writing is always very dangerous. So Geling, I know that since the corona pandemic started, you have spoken publicly against the Chinese government's COVID measures, and therefore your new books actually have been forbidden from publishing in China. They are withdrawn from the publishers, right? It's very sad for your readers, of course. So you kind of become involuntary exile, changing from the status of voluntary exile. Could you comment on that?
I think it's all worth it. For myself, if I cannot say truth, say what's really in my mind, it's going to kill me. This feeling, So I know they hide the truth. So the first article is called hide. They always hide. They hide many truths from Chinese people. So this time, this hiding is going to kill so many people. Why do you still hide? So this is my frustration, anger. I expressed it, and after I finished writing this, I talked to my husband. I said that this might be the last straw that drops on this fragile the system. Might get me stop. I will stop getting paid, and my books will getting banned. Do you think I want to? He said yes. I said okay. So I press this, and it will be gone tomorrow. Well, it's different day. Okay, it's a different day, different life. So we prepared. Nothing. So and afterwards, they even sentenced me to social death. Now, if you check Baidu or some, these 词条 is no longer exist. So I don't believe I really disappear by their erasing. So I'm still here talking. So and my works will come to surface in Chinese readership. I really trust this. I don't think anything that go absurd to this extent will go on. I really have hope. I think Chinese people are not so stupid to let this absurdity go on. I think the darkest moment will be yes, it will be the moment before dawn.
Oh, by the way, the first painting on the left by Yo-Yo is a green painting with a figure with mask. That is Dr. Li Yang.
Silence.
And Yang Lian, you have been a seasoned exile for many decades. You said that every time you re-enter China, you'll be asked to drink tea, right, due to the national security. But in the last few years, they did accept some appointments in Chinese universities. But I think that stopped again since the Hong Kong protest.
Well, the reason actually very clearly, I think we're becoming the Chinese writers in exile. It was because when we were after Tiananmen massacre, that time we were in New Zealand, and one of New Zealand students wrote 3 copies of my little book, just published in China, but being banned immediately. And then he was in Beijing, and he and the editor of the book as a thief and got into the warehouse and stolen a few copies, and all others were destroyed. And I thought, and that day when I heard this news, is my beginning of exile, and it's totally different, unexpected page of my life. Then after 1994, we becoming New Zealand citizens. And by later some chance, I could enter China, and there was complicated stories, but interesting enough, after that change, China becoming my own foreign country, and Chinese language and becoming my foreign mother tongue. And this is an interesting pair. But again, even that time before I can imagine to go back, Goethe and I we also now we never use the word of back. We say go to, and even that time I said that I made exile from China, but I never actually exiled from Chinese language. We are always insider and outsider. Insider because we are writing is directly at the front line of the contemporary Chinese poetry. And not maybe through the official publications, but through the personal contacts, through the magazine underground, like this. Now with WeChat or something, of course, much more. And our survivors poetry magazine many times been banned, but it survived. It's still there, and you can see that now the www.surpoetry.com. Before there was survivorspoetry.com, but then there was a bind again, and then we have to change the address. Anyway, insider because of the writing, outsider because we are somehow has this dissonance, so we can see also the problem and the limitation of so-called Chinese writings quite clearly. So that is a good way, to intermove and pushing on political change, of course. But to me, the cultural transformation is much more profound layer. Let's say, below or as a foundation of political situation. Without this awareness have been built within the people, and this surface of political slogans, shouting on this side and shouting on that side could be changing, but without the real change. And so exile to me is not only a word. I think, especially with the global situation today, with the Russian war, with the Hong Kong change, with the pandemic, exile is the grammar of life of everybody. And so who can say you are not exile if you try to be creative in your mind? And either in China, outside in the world.
Thank you. That's beautifully said. There are so many questions I could have asked you, but I think the audience are very eager to hear some excerpts from a recent works now, right? So now I would like to ask Geling to read from her most recent novella, 密语者, The Secret Talker. So Geling would read this part in Chinese, and then Larry will come up and read the English translation. Please, go ahead.
I'm a very bad reader because I stumble through words too easily. Okay, this story is about a woman having an affair with a lover coming from a network. So she confesses all her life to him or her. She calls him the secret talker, 密语者。他告诉他，那叫印花布，是他生长的那个村庄里的土产。过去村里的农家女都会织这样的布。雨天，你走在那条两旁是农舍的石板路上，听得见这家那家织布机木索走动的声音。乔红梅没有意识到，她已开始向这人展开了他的由来，他的历史。那个他曾经憎恨过的江南村庄，在他向他摇移的画面中，竟然相当美丽。他让他看大全景中的他，黑瓦、粉墙、乌篷小船、无际的金黄菜花。他推进画面，是中景了，一座石桥，桥上走过放牛的孩子，孩子中的一个小姑娘，6岁或7岁，便是他。他生在文革那年，目不识丁的父母给他起了个时髦的名字红梅。他说他几度想改掉这个香气的名字，却下不了决心。毕竟父母只生养他一次，只命名他一次。他回答说，他看见了那个万里之外的水乡小村庄。看来你很爱他，不是吗？爱他才有这样的笔调啊。他一惊，他从来不认为他爱过他，他不惜一切的要逃离他。逃离他之后，他对生人撒谎，想把他瞒住。他曾经认为哪里都比他的村子好，那么孤陋寡闻，井底之蛙般的村子。在他懂事后，来了一帮叫做知青的人，进一步证实了他对村子的直觉。他们整天讲他的坏话，和他一样认为他是世界上最丑陋的地方。他怎么会爱他？他说，你大概又要失望了。我一生的努力似乎都要远离我的村子，越远越好。最后一次走出它是9年前，我下决心永远不再回去。走过村口的纪念碑，我不知为什么停下脚，看了一眼上面的名字，213个少女的名字，是一夜间死去的少女。我从来没有好好看过她们的名字。她们死去后的第2年，我的母亲出生了。那年冬天出生的全是女婴，似乎是死去少女们的替补。我一个个念着纪念碑上和我一样香气的名字。我的小姑在第6位，我的2位姨姥姥在第80和第81。村里当年3个姓氏的女孩，从6岁到18岁，一夜间全死了。那些生前被叫做赔钱货的少女们，全死在1937年11月的一个雨夜，连日本兵都惊得一声不止。日本兵在傍晚时分进了村，在每座房舍里搜索中国兵、粮食和少女。家家都只剩下老人和男孩。一个日本兵发着脾气的朝一个稻草垛捅下刺刀。（括号等等，我向你们描述过我们家乡的稻草垛吗？许多好事、丑事、可怕的事都发生在那些稻草垛下。他们终年立在那儿， 知道许多人所不知的秘密，见不得天日的定情，失足间的仇杀，不得已的堕胎等等。等刺刀拔出来时，时局突变了。这日本兵看到刺刀尖上有鲜血，在初冬的夜色里冒起细微的白色热气。日本兵又扎一刀，这一刀下去，血便从刀尖往下滴了。稻草垛却抖也不走，不出一声。10分钟后，所有日本兵围住了村里20多个稻草垛，刺刀从四面八方捅进去，没有一刀不见血。一个个稻草垛还是如常的沉默，没有一根草哆嗦。翻译开始喊话，说：“想活的快出来，马上要放火了。”稻草垛不动，无语，如同惯常那样。吃尽多少命，却从来不吐。汽油泼上去，火虎啸狮吼地烧起来。日本兵拄着长枪，看火中的稻草垛先成金的，后成红的，最后成黑的。灰白的草木灰动荡起来，在稠密的冷风中起舞，空气都是血肉的焦糊味儿。饥饿了几天的日本兵趴在地上呕吐出胆汁，他们不必去查点，也大致清楚这场杀出的战果，而他们一点也不得意，为着什么不可名状的理由悻悻、沮丧、窝囊着。他们最终也没有勇气揭开一个个成了灰烬的草垛，他们心照不宣地拭去刀尖上未干的血。一个村的女孩被他们歼灭了，这点他们心里有数，但他们那样温顺沉静地接受了死亡，他们为此失魂落魄。接下去他们放弃了对整个村子的烧杀掳掠，深一脚浅一脚的开拔了。这是他们在侵略中遭遇的最不寻常的一次抵抗。乔红梅写到这里，发现两眼胀胀的，不再看得清自己。他从来没想到会为自己的村庄如此自豪，他从来就没发现200多个牺牲的少女如此震撼他，也没有发现他们的牺牲如此的有意义。是他赋予他们的意义吗？或者原本就存在的意义被他突然追寻了出来？这人在读了他的故事后，只回了一句话：面对这样的故事，我完全哑然。他想告诉他从来没把这个故事告诉过别人，甚至没有告诉过她的丈夫。他不知为什么，或许他在为他找出意义之前，他只是所有抗日战争惨烈故事中的一则。他没有向德兰讲述他，因为他向他撒了谎，就像他对不少人撒谎一样。他只想为自己捏造出一个出生地，蒙古、西藏都行，都远比他那个缺见识、缺胸怀的小村庄强。他对德兰撒谎称他是黄山人，他想用黄山的伟岸替代小村庄的小家子气。乔红梅却克制了自己，她只想向这人原原本本把村庄的历史讲下去。她说村里自从少女绝迹后，对女孩的态度完全变了，再也不叫他们赔钱货。牺牲的213名童女成了全村人的护身神明。他们开始重女轻男，送女孩子进正常的学校，而剥削男孩子们的劳力。村里渐渐有了女孩远走高飞的风气，去镇上念书的女孩很难再回去嫁村里的男孩。他的母亲家境太差，没有去镇上念书，因此母亲的梦想就是养一个女儿，送她去镇上念书。这人说， 我现在正看着你，你两眼相投，心里有一点揪痛，你为自己大动感情感到莫名其妙，你难为情了，你把脸掉开了。乔红梅说：“谢谢你的耐心，听我讲了一个离你108000里的故事。我知道美国人不喜欢悲剧，我丈夫就不喜欢。”
The Secret Talker, she's opening up to a stranger on the internet. Secret Talker is published by HarperCollins, Hyperdia, translated by Jeremy Tian. She told him this was called pattern print cloth, a handicraft of the village she'd grown up in. Every woman in this place used to know how to weave this fabric. And on rainy days, if you walk down the paved road between these rural dwellings, you'd hear the shuttles clacking as the looms worked away. She didn't realize she was already starting to disclose her origins, her history to this man. In the picture she presented him, the Jiangnan village she once despised became beautiful. She showed it to him in its entirety. The black tiles and the whitewashed walls, the covered boats, the endless yellow fields of rapeseed blossom. Then zooming to a medium shot, a stone bridge with children walking across it, young cowherds on their way to work. Amongst them was a girl of 6 or 7. That was her. She'd been born in the year of the Cultural Revolution, and her illiterate parents had given her a name that was trendy at the time, Homei, or red plum blossom. She wanted to change this country bumpkin-sounding name on a few occasions, but couldn't bring herself to do it. After all, her parents had only raised her once, had only named her once. He replied that he could see this remote riverside village. It sounds like you love it a lot, don't you? That's the only way you can describe it in those terms. She was startled. She never thought she loved it. In fact, she wanted above all to get away from it. When meeting new people, she lied about it, trying to keep it hidden. She once thought anywhere was better than her village. That back and beyond place is out of touch as a frog at the bottom of the well. As a young child, she'd encountered a group of people known as educated youths, city kids sent down to the countryside who confirmed her instincts. They had done nothing but criticize the place, and just like her, they had thought nowhere on this earth could be so hideous. How could she love it? Homei said, "You're probably going to be disappointed again. I've worked hard all my life to get as far from the village as possible. I left that place for the last time 9 years ago, and I made up my mind I would never go back. The day I left, when I walked past the commemorative plaque by the entrance of the village, for some reason I stopped to read it. 213 girls died in a single night. I'd never looked at their names properly. The year after they passed away, my mother came into this world. And that winter, only female babies were born, as if to make up for the dead ones. I said those names out loud, each as unsophisticated as my own. My aunt was the 6th one, and my great aunts were numbers 80 and 81. All the girls with only 3 weird surnames among them, aged between 6 and 18, had died in one night. Those young women who were called dead losses while they were alive, were all murdered on a rainy night in November 1937. Even the Japanese troops were stunned into silence. They entered the village that evening, searching every home for Chinese soldiers, food, and young women. Only old people and young boys were left. One of the men lost his temper and stabbed his bayonet into a haystack. Hang on, have I told you about the village haystacks? Many good things, bad things, terrifying things took place beneath those haystacks. They stood there all year round and knew many secrets, shameful relationships, family rivalries, unavoidable abortions. Blade came out and everything changed. There was fresh blood on it, faintly emitting steam in the early winter night. He stabbed again, and this time the blood dripped off the blade. Yet the haystack didn't so much as quiver, didn't let out a single sound. 10 minutes later, Japanese soldiers had surrounded all the 20-odd haystacks and were plunging their bayonets in on all sides. All came out bloody, yet the piles of hay remained quiet without even a single straw shaking. The interpreter started yelling, saying, "Come out quick if you want to live, we're setting these on fire." No movement, no words. The haystacks could swallow any number of secrets and wouldn't let anything back out. Gasoline was splashed onto them, and the flames roared like lions and tigers. The Japanese troops leaned on their rifles, watching as the hay turned gold, then red, and finally black. Wisps of gray ash quivering in the remains, dancing in an icy gale. The air smelled of burnt flesh. The soldiers, starved from it for many days, bent over and threw up bile. They didn't have to look any closer to understand the results of this massacre. They weren't pleased with themselves at all. They felt, for some reason, they felt angry, distressed, frightened. In the end, they weren't even brave enough to tear open the smoking mounds, but quietly wiped the still wet blood off their bayonets. All the girls in the village had been exterminated. They'd been prepared for that, but the resignation and silence by which these girls had accepted their death stunned the Japanese out of their wits. They gave up their plans to pillage and torture the rest of the villagers and simply departed. This was the most bizarre act of resistance they encountered during the entire invasion. At this point, Homei found her eyes too swollen with tears to see the words clearly. She never imagined she could be so proud of her village. These more than 200 young women who'd given up their lives had not affected her so much until this moment. Nor had she found their sacrifice this meaningful. Was she endowing them with significance? Or had this already been present, but she'd only just discovered it? The man's only response was, "I have no words in the face of such a story." She wanted to tell him that she never shared this story with anyone, not even her husband. No idea why. Perhaps until she understood its meaning, it had only been one of many stories about Chinese resistance. She never told Glenn because she'd lied to him, as she'd lied to so many others. She always invented birthplace, Inner Mongolia or Tibet, wherever, far better than this ignorant, closed-off village. She told Glenn she was from the Yellow Mountains, hoping that imposing landscape would erase the pettiness of her little village. And yet now she stopped lying and told this man everything about her village. After the girls had been killed, the attitude toward female children changed completely, and they were no longer known as dead losses. The 213 sacrificial victims became the villagers' spirit guardians. Women were now privileged over men, so girls were sent to town for school, while boys were exploited for their physical strength, once again demonstrating the narrow-minded foolishness of these people. Gradually, the women drifted away, moving on to bigger and better things. Girls who studied in the city rarely came back to marry village boys. Homei had been one of those girls. Her mother's family had been too poor to send her away, and so her mother's one wish had been to give her daughter the education she'd missed out on. The man said, "I wish I could see you now, your eyes full of homesickness, a pang of guilt in your heart. You find it strange to be so moved. You're embarrassed. You've turned your face aside." Homei wrote, "Thank you for your patience listening to me, telling a story of millions of miles removed from you. I know Americans don't like tragedies. My husband doesn't."
Thank you, Larry. I really love this section in your novella. By the way, the English translation is published by HarperCollins, so you're welcome to get a copy from some of the evil enterprises in the world. Okay, so there could be so many questions concerning this part, but I would like to ask Yang Lian to read his audience. Yes, please, Yang Lian.
Novel about her husband, and my poem starts from my wife. because the first poem I'm going to read is called the English title is the
Summer's one and only harbor.
Thank you very much. Yeah. And this poem was written for Yo-Yo here. And when we, actually quite a long time ago, when we visited the Poetry International Rotterdam, everybody knows Rotterdam, a big, big harbor. And there was a very dark day, like now, not before. And so that was the beginning, actually, of our exile, but the feeling we were so old. And even now think we were actually a kid. But this poem is still quite function with my life here. And when with you, there's paintings, which I feel a lot of water weaves in the painting. And again, the poem I think works quite well. Yeah. Okay, I read Chinese first, and Zhiyi will read the English translation after my original. 夏季的唯一港口，给游泳。天空更加阴暗。你说这船老了，一生运载的风暴都已走远，该卸下自己了，让石头船舷去腐烂。夏季是唯一的港口。夜晚发红的锈蚀的古老铁环早就断了。你说月亮像被弃的婴儿，在水上写字的人只能化身为水，把港口变成伤口。听，炎热雨声里那不变的记忆，雨到处刺痛你，雨声是最后的小屋，让你居住。你老了，传说。这唯一一个夏季漂泊了多年，唯一一个时间注入漆成黑色的家，波浪之下只有我们的躯体。
Summer's one and only harbor for Liu. The sky was even darker, he said. This boat ages. The storms it carried for a lifetime are all gone. It should unload itself, let its stone sides rot. Summer is the only harbor. Night, an ancient hoop of iron, reddening and corroding, long broken, loosened. The moon's like an abandoned infant. Those who write on water must be embodied as water. Turn a harbor into a wound. Listen to the unchanging memory in the blazing sound of rain. Rain lacerates you. Its sound is the final tiny room you live in. You are aging, but don't sit. This, the one and only summer, has been drifting for years. The one and only time flowing into a house painted black. Below the waves, there are only our bodies.
Thank you. Well, my next poem actually is getting closer. It's about Berlin. And, well, we are not the first generation of the writers in exile, even in 20th century. There were a long generation before us. And in later 1910, 1920s, the first generation of writers in exile was the Russian writers from the former Soviet Union. And Geling and I, we both love Nabokov. And Nabokov is the representative figure of that generation. And his family is kept from Russia and stayed in Berlin. And his father was killed on the street in Berlin, and still buried now the Russian cemetery in Berlin, near Tegel Airport. I was there. And again, his book, his memoir, Speaking the Memory, to me, it's almost like a little Bible for the all writers in exile. And I love that book. On one side, the book is so heavy, and it's the poor, painful life, exile experience, and all this about father too. But on the other side, maybe you know that Nabokov was a wonderful butterfly specialist. So that was almost every page. You can feel, you can even see the beautiful butterfly fly there. So the book, it was extremely nice as well. But the most beautiful butterfly was the style of writing of Nabokov. So after all this heavy and light side, and it's making fantastic balance. And I have to say, feeling that after all this light side represent the literature, to look down, almost like the attitude of literature, to look down this very heavy, dark reality. So I wrote this poem, Butterfly Berlin. And luckily so many Chinese friends here, so you can recognize the rhyme in the poem, which is specially designed for the poem. 蝴蝶，柏林。父亲的墓地被更多墓地深深盖住，塌下来的石头像云，夯实的重量里，一只博弈意外系出，一跳一跳找到你，当你还英俊，细长，着迷于花朵摇荡的小扇子，公园中器官烫伤器官的吻，空气的阻力也得学，墙死死按住彩绘的肩膀，暮色垂落，反衬小小明艳一跃。当你的心惊觉这一瞬，一座城市已攥紧你绝命的籍贯，老没有词，只有扼在咽喉下的呻吟，才懂得反叛越纤细越极端，一种长出金黄斑点的力，推开水泥波浪，只比世界高一寸。海蝴蝶不失望迁徙出恐怖，飞呀，塔马拉和父亲淋淋扛着身体，轻拍下一代流亡者入眠。灰烬的目录没有最远处，你期在醒来就脱掉重量的皱纸上树叶暗绿的灯罩奴镜。当你不怕被一缕香攫住，成为那缕香，一物般递回一封信，打着海浪的邮戳，柏林。
这首诗是献给柏林的初代流亡者纳博科夫的。Butterfly, Berlin. The father's grave sinks deeply into many more graves, covered, stone collapsing like a cloud. From under the weight of tapped earth, the thin wind surprisingly evades. Leaping to find you when you were still comely, slender, captivated by tiny fans of swaying flowers in the park, one organ burning another, a kiss. The resistance of the air must be learned, the wall tightly pressing the painted shoulders, the falling colors of death set off a small, shining leap. When your heart suddenly feels this moment, Your city grips tightly your ancestral origin, your fated end. Aging has no words, but a moan through your choked throat. Then to know the thinner betrayal is, the more extreme. A force that throws yellow golden specks, pushes open the concrete waves, floating above the world only by an inch. The sea butterfly doesn't dream of migrating out of terror, flying Tamara and her father, flickering, carrying bodies lightly packed to see the next generation of exiles. The catalogue of ashes has no horizon. You perch at the address, which upon waking shrugs off the weight of home. The leaf's dark green lampshade moves closer. When you fear not of being caught by a thread of fragrance, you then become the fragrance, sending back the letter like an inheritance, bearing a stamp of ocean waves, burden.
Okay, I have to point out that the English translation of this poem is just totally finished today. Revised by Zhiyi because she was very sensitive. She said this translation is a little weird, some sentence, because the original English translation was a part of the special project, the poet's translation project between the Chinese and the English poet. And it was translated by an American poet, and based on the discussion. So there are, language is so limited. So I'm sure it's a lot of misunderstanding, which is luckily we got pretty, question me, and I thought it was very right. Okay, the last poem now is for this section is again moving even closer. The title is Frankfurt. And the poem is about the university. And when Zhiyi, you and I walked through the campus, I saw, oh my God, Adorno's table was there. And the manuscript on the table. I know this Frankfurt school. I urgently read a little bit more about Adorno, but I really said wonderful ideas with special our context now. And I wrote this very short poem. So this is one of my very last poem. And of course, the translation is a very, very, very baby, the youngest translation of my poem by Zhiyi again. Okay. This is referred with this famous sentence. I will not talk about poetry. You may all know that. Disagree and agree in the poem. 法兰克福，阿多诺不懂诗，一个学派沿着手稿萎缩，跟踪小巷，弯进死角。战争留给空白的辩论，草地又像春天尽情呕吐，沉默和罪恶交互抒情。阿多诺懂毁灭，沿着看不见的雪，死者唯一求渡之河，一滴滴流进诗。
I'm going to read the English translation. Professor Gustav Bachmann, pardon me, what I'm going to read does not represent my opinion, does not represent my judgment of a Frankfurt school.
This is a free country.
Frankfurt. Adorno understands no poetry. A school withers along a wrinkled manuscript. and followed a winding alley into a dead angle, leaving the war to empty debates. A meadow again throws up its guts toward the spring. Silence and sin exchange low passion. Adorno understands destruction. Along the invisible blood, the only river the dead swim across, drop by drop, into poetry.
Thank you.
I have to say that I have prepared so many questions, which I don't think I have time to ask. Actually, Yang Lian has also written a poem for Geling, which I don't think we have time to read for now. So I will just open the floor for questions, and in the end, if you're still interested in the poem for Geling, write to us. We will send you the Chinese and English translation. So please, let's give our writer a big round of applause, and then we'll open the floor for questions.
It's great to see you today because I have only Miss Yang on YouTube, but today I can see you physically. There's a question for me is Miss Yang, you mentioned the ordinary year. You just mentioned that. So this word reminds me of this year because I also think 2022 is also not an ordinary year because in this year there will be so many heavens and there has already so many things happened because you say in this year and
趁机插一句，如果你想用中文提问题，我可以帮您翻译成英文，没有问题。
没关系，我直接用英文问。
我是给其他人说的，可能有些人想到问题，但是不敢用英文。您接着说。
Yeah, because you say that Xi Jinping will continue his third term presidency this October, and in April, the Chinese government take 20 million people in the room, and it's unimaginary, and that's like the year you have experienced before. And so, do you think this year is also a history-changing year? The Chinese history may change from this year. There's more sensitive, and maybe there's more depth because I heard from your poetry from Miss Yan that you described the brutality of the Japanese soldier, but when I see the history, and you can see more brutality in the Chinese history, like Taiping Tianguo, or in the Cultural Revolution. There's a book named 血的神话, Gao Xianchang. When you look at that, you'll be surprised by the brutality which Chinese against Chinese. So, do you think this tragedy will happen again, like from this year? Because there's so many similarities between the year, like 30 years before and 40 years before, and the things happen right now. There's more censorship, more dictatorship, and which shows do you think the literature play at this point of time?
Thank you. I would like to ask our audience to keep a question short because there are many people who want to raise their hands.
Well, I tried a short answer. This is not a perfectly ordinary year, and is my, let's say, understanding based on the Tiananmen massacre. But I proved that, and how many times, we actually could recite this line when we, for example, saw 9/11, when we saw the Second Iraqi War. when we saw the, even in Chinese, when we saw like the Hong Kong, you know, when we saw the coronavirus started, all these times, you know, once again and again, I thought our situation never actually moved from this point of fate. So it's not that we try to, let's say, leave this route, but we deepen this route. And literature is based on this kind of, let's say, yeah, to hold what the principles based on this understanding. And then with this point, the ordinary year is to try to question ourselves. Do we really remember all what happened in our life? Can we deepen ourselves based on all this experience? And what is now and what is facing us in the future? So that's the reason why I wrote this.
并穿绿衣服的女生，对。
Hello, Yang 老师，你好。At first, thanks for the excellent reading about the story I read about the book. And I have two small questions for you. First, I worked here for a Chinese bookshop in German, and so I'm very interested that you said you're a good listener, and I think good listener is also a good observer. And did you observe something special or interesting thing about Chinese literature in German? And the second question is a little personal, but as a literature fan and a new fan, I'd like to know that would be there some topics or something that only matters to you or your writing, your characters, but you barely had the chance to talk about it in the public. Thank you very much, and I wish I would please keep writing. Yeah, thank you.
I didn't get your first question. What's this at?
我用中文说一下，就是我想很想问一下您，就是我作为一个初级从业者，然后想知道您在德国有没有观察到什么关于就是中国文学在德国的一些事情、一些现象，就是您作为一个中国的作家。
I think German people are in many fields are not very risk taker, you know.
Publishing, for instance.
Yeah, in publishing business especially. They always watch, is this book doing well in other languages before the offer. You know, the secret talk we got offer, but because of the copyright conflict with the Taiwanese, so still in the funk. Okay, so the business is still. But I think we are very, very small minority as a Chinese writer, as Chinese literary somehow people. Yeah, it's quite painful to think about that. You know, it's many people can do very well without Chinese literature right here, and they don't seem to be savvy enough to know. And so it's not like in France, not much less than in England. So I think those people are much better, much savvier readers. But the good point is, when I live in Berlin, I found that I'm not bothered by anything. I'm left alone to write. That's a good thing. That's also one of the reasons I choose to live in Berlin. I'm just an ordinary wife and a mother.
那个后面再等下问题。
Thank you very much for your willingness to share your experience, like life experience and also writing experience, yes. So I have a question to Ms. Yang Lian. And you mentioned before, I don't remember exactly your sentence, but you mentioned before in your all of your life experience can be summarized to just one simple sentence, which is what is that? It's the situation of life, right? Do you remember that? I think it's kind of abstract for me. Could you please elaborate or talk a little further about these thoughts? What do you mean by that? Thank you very much. Or do you remember that? Like all of your experience can be summarized or simplified to just one sentence. It's a situation of life.
但是你能不能用一句话总结你的人生经历？
That's one sentence. You just mentioned that before.
You can take off your mask because it makes you less understood.
你用中文的。
杨卫先生，你之前提过，您在那个之前的那个经验中，您把它总结成了一句话，一句话是 "It's just situation of life"。
就是他说你一般总是总结一句话，而是写成一句话。
Yeah. So then there's a full stop, not a question mark, which is so true. Well, as I use the example of Tiananmen, Tiananmen, normally people treat that as what's happening. But when I use the situation, the word of situation, and that represent not only the happening with the limitation of time, the situation is almost like a synchronic. It's happened in the deeper layer of our life. So it's actually hold all different kind of happenings by the nature of the situation together. So in that case.
Sorry to interrupt you, but what do you mean by the nature of situation?
You have to keep it short. I'm sorry about that, but you can keep asking afterwards. So the Mr. in yellow T-shirt.
好，是这样，我有一个问题想问一下严老师，是这样。
严还是杨？
严，严女士。首先是这样，我从大约25年前开始第一次读你的小说，当时我就很一个 shock，我就觉得你小说还可以这样写，当时是解放军文艺出版社的那个什么绿雪。还有此心的草地，当时是您可能用您自己的话说，当时那个创作的激情就像原矿一样那种取之不尽的感觉。但是之后呢，就感觉您的创作经历啊，到了美国以后，哥伦比亚学院以后，写作我会感受到明显的有一些不同。我的问题从纯粹的这个写作角度来看的话，您觉得在西方这样一个写作的训练带给您最大的一个感受和一个最大的让您最大的一个提高是什么？我想这是我一直以来很迫切的一个问题。
Okay, he has a question that he's been reading Yang Ling's work since 25 years, and he said that her early work seems to be driven mostly by passion, but after she went to America, that seems to have changed. So his question is, what kind of change she thinks that the training in writing in the Western academic institutions has brought her?
I divided my writing career in three parts. One was before I left China, and I was a writer working for the army. So it was a professional writer, but the army supported me. I was still in uniform. I had insignia, which was lieutenant colonel. Okay, so I never killed anyone. At that time, my army experience was very, very fresh. So I used that experience, that life, to write 3 novels. Then after I left China and I was a student of a creative writing department, graduate student. So then I started to learn to write with more ration, with more discipline, and with more methods. And now I feel very free to go inside of a person, to go out and to change the point of view. And because I have knowledge, not only the passion and the talent, but I have a skill. I can control my writing much better. I think writer, just like all the forms of life, writing, is you have to grow, you have to mature forever. You have to, this is a process of growth. To me, then the second phase of my writing is my experience as an immigrant. So I wrote many immigrants' experience, like Fusan. I think you might know it. It's very much represent my immigrant life. Then my husband got back his job in a State Department, so he became a diplomat again. So I followed him to Africa. Then we to Taiwan and to Europe. Then I think I got out of the system of writing my experience as an immigrant. Then I started to look back at my experience, my life, and my long time thinking of Chinese experience. Then I think this is already beyond the direct experience, because I traveled so many places and I compared everywhere I stayed, I lived. I would subconsciously compare the cultures, words, letters, and I think this, by comparison, I join my Chinese letter. So I think this is a very important period for me to write my Chinese life again. So these 3 phases of my writing is generally I divide it like this.
Because of time, there are so many hands. I will take one last question from the audience, from the row, who has been shooting up her hands all the time. So please, the row, the sunglasses. And after that, I would ask Yang Lian to read his poem for Zhiyi as the beautiful ending of tonight.
严歌苓老师非常的喜欢你，然后2个问题，一个是就是你从什么时候开始跟非常边缘的人群共情的，然后您是来自一个大知识分子家庭，然后就是我觉得您其实就算不用付出很多努力，也可以过非常 comfortable 的生活，所以我很好奇。然后第2个问题就是， 我看您在一个采访中说，就是您拒绝被称为女性主义作家，但我觉得您分明就是给很多女性树立了非常好的榜样，通过您的作品，然后您辛勤的工作，还有您非常幸福的婚姻。然后我想说，为什么您不借此机会拓宽大家对女性主义的理解，而是要拒绝自己被称为女性主义作家呢？非常的好奇。
Well, the two questions is that, first of all, she asked since when did Yang Lian begin to feel empathy with marginalized groups? The second question is about her refusal to be labeled a feminist writer. And she says that she has a beautiful family, house, etc. So why doesn't she accept this label and to expand the significance of being a feminist?
First, I answer the second question first. I think I'm a writer, and it doesn't mean I write many vivid female characters that I'm titled, categorized as a feminist writer. I'm just a writer. I could be neutral, right? And I write, Lu Fanyan is my most important work. The character, the protagonist is a man. So, and my last work, last collection, I was able to publish in China was about animals. So, you cannot say, 她是女性作家，因为她写了很多女性，她写，然后呢，我说那是不是我就兽性作家了
Yeah. She's saying that recently she wrote a collection of stories about animals. So if she writes about women and feminists, now she writes about animals, and she's an animist.
So 这是我想。Yeah, that's my answer to your second question. And what is your first? I already said.
Since when you begin to feel empathy with marginalized
groups? Yeah. I think all the good writers feel empathy with marginal people because their life is so unpredictable. There were so many changes, because they're not like lawyers or accountants. They go to work, they get paid. But especially in Chinese society now, the most unpredictable class is 农民工, right? And yeah. So I think they are affected by everything, the society that happened to the society, like politics, like the regulations, the law, and they are affected the most. That's why they project Chinese life the most accurately. So that's why I like to write about their lives. And I also found this the similar empathy by reading Manuel Puig, who is Argentine writer who wrote this very famous novel called The Kiss of the Spider Woman. Later made into a very good movie. So he said in his childhood, he felt that the mainstream men are intimidating to him. He feel much more comfortable with the marginal people. I feel same way. Yeah, I think from this low angle to watch the mainstream, I take nothing for granted, just like these marginal people. I can feel more. I can be more sensitive.
These are wonderful questions and wonderful answers, and I can feel the energy in the room, like this literary discussion where people are willing to ask your questions. But every good thing comes to an end, and maybe imperfection is the best. So I will end today with inviting Yang Lian to read his poem for English translation.
Well, I think that's the discussion is very, very nice as the introduction of my little poem. Well, this poem written in 2020, shortly after we met in Berlin. They both lived there, and it was for so long we never actually really met. Who knows why? And but since we know each other, the understanding was almost immediately being built. Actually, the first time we met with Yo-Yo Larry was the lunch given by Ai Weiwei. And he asked me, how about Yang Lian? Is it okay to invite him for lunch? I said, why not? Yeah. And but on the other side, she wrote novels. I know she's very popular in China, and somehow so I never really know her understanding about political stand or principles. As a little tasting, I had my short sequence on Hong Kong. The poem called the poetry of history backwards is based on the Hong Kong. The fightings happened in the Hong Kong street in 2019, and German version published in the Lecture International, and I gave the Mandarin, but also the Chinese text to Geling and see how her reaction. But next day, Geling wrote to me, says, "What a wonderful poem!" I said, "Good." Yeah. And then quite soon, I heard this really awful news about her. In China, she had been banned, and then her movie was banned too. And well, let's say that's not strange for me at all, since we start from our writing in 1978. All the time, this was main experience in our life. But for a novelist, especially a very beloved novelist, I guess it's not that often happen. And then I feel very, something touched me. And then of course, we know each other quite well. We went to their home very often, and beautiful bamboos, and Geling was wonderful cooking, and we talked about her father a lot, as you already hear, and then also a lot of novels I read. So, after all, this poem is titled Fiction 2020. Nabokov here again, since we all love Nabokov. 虚构2020给格林。纳博科夫带着他的蝴蝶，钻出大湖的反光。嘿，你是谁？一枚狐仙，一弯白蛇，同时是书生。爱上写成的命运，就在那儿悄悄转世，写到一座一城武汉，就牵不出悠悠呜咽。躺下听，音乐里压碎骨质的嘎嘎声，谁说再返回一个阴间，溅出一条大江，扼住你的喉咙，浪踢你，永如相思。故乡的鬼故事，无限沉吟，这次远离。人默认虚构，当你院子里的竹叶也早起，朴素幻化一夜曙光的白纸，每个字有翩翩舞姿，而舞台还空着，空的原版， 憋住父亲的咳嗽，一首诗填满亡灵们的不在，像丢弃的手稿，被黑暗一丢再丢，被禁止的呼吸吸入，被禁止的拍摄，没开始的一场隐喻，瞪视血肉的苍茫。父亲倒躺进乱石，又一个角色等到被辜负的美，是你吗？一种远古的忧郁，已深至将死的时间，赠出的青春，且叹且演，都是真的。2020挤进最薄的茧子，蠕动胀裂，睁开阴间那么鲜艳的蝶翼，那部科夫在此，父亲在此，大历史逃不尽的幽魂。梦啊，笑啊，仅仅一滴，谁读懂便伤心如字。窗内窗外，同一抹月痕，竹叶飒飒腾空了乐曲。第一盏灯牵着无数学出身体的影子。
Fiction 2020 for Billions. Nabokov, carrying his butterflies, draws out the reflection of the big lake. Hey, who are you? A tiny fox bird, a curve of white snake. At the same time, you are a handsome young scholar, in love with a written fate, and reborn there on the quiet. Mentions a plagued city, then can't track out of faint whimpers. Lie down to hear the bone-crushing rattle in the music. Who said they're coming back? Hell spurts from a shred of the great river, grips your throat, waves kick you like love sickness. Hometown ghost stories eternally murmur of the staying away. People tacitly accept the fiction. As bamboo leaves in your yard, wake early too, world transformed into the white page of first light. In every word, light dancer steps, though the stage is still empty. The original of emptiness, holding in father's cough, a poem, cramped in the absence of departed souls, like lost manuscripts. Using the dark to be lost again and again, forbidden breath oozes in forbidden filming, an unbegun metaphor, stares at a vast emptiness of flesh and blood. Father drips back into the shingle. Another role waits for disappointed beauty. Is it you, an ancient melancholy now deep enough to choke time to death? A donated youth sighs and performs. Both are true. 2020 squeezes into the thinnest cocoon. Squirms, swells, splits, opens butterfly wings bright as hell. Nabokov is here, father is here, great history. Ghosts impossible to wash out. Smile and dream, only one job. Who reason understands is heartbroken as the words inside and outside the window, the same touch of moon shadow. Bamboo leaves self-navigate music. The first lamp leaves countless shadows swirling out of a body.
我对他说的天天都说了。Very, very beautiful. Thank you, Yang Lian.
That's the last word. Thank you all. And you're all very welcome to the small manifestos reception.